JoJo's power system has to be one of the most interesting in all of anime. Having what are basically these ghosts that punch each other really hard with jaw-dropping abilities is just fascinating to watch. Seeing each interaction with new stands against the main group stands and having them clash and bounce off one another, and seeing those interactions is just one of the great appeals that JoJo has. Each stand is unique and original, some with amazing abilities that can just literally restart the universe, while others can just make some really good food. This just pretty much goes to show that not all stands are equal when it comes to power, and when there are things that can be compared, it must be ranked. So in this case, what stands are the strongest out of the whole series, and as well as which ones are the absolute weakest. In this video, I will do the impossible and something that nobody in all of the history that JoJo's has ever done before, and rank the strength of JoJo stands. Now, there will be some ground rules here before we get into the list. For one, I am an anime-only pleb at the moment, with only very little knowledge of what's to come. So, I will only be ranking up until Part 6, Stone Ocean. I know. I'm sorry for all those Steel Ball Run fans being stolen from this list with D4C and Tusk not being there. I do know how powerful they get, but since I haven't read it at all, I don't know the context of it being used yet, so I feel like it would be unfair to rate them. The second rule will be that the stands that I will rate will mostly be combat stands only. Stands that are only used for combat throughout the anime. Without this rule, stands like Cinderella and Pearl Jam would just be too easy to throw in on this list and call it a day. It just limited my options and made me think about what stands I was putting down in the weak stands list. The third rule, which actually isn't even a rule, is the note that there is no stands that are just flat out weak. As Dio says, there are different situations that a stand can be near unbeatable no matter how useless they may seem. Each stand has its own strengths, and it really does rely on the user to utilize their stance no matter how weird the ability is. It's just something to mention before the comments scream at me for the one scene. I know, I watched it. Please don't hurt me. Now, just a reminder, as I am a YouTuber with 340 subscribers? Well, as a YouTuber with 340 subscribers, that's going fast. My opinion is absolute. My opinion on a video ranking fictional ghosts with abilities that can end the world in an instant is pure fact, and nobody else can say anything about it. If you have any problems with my list, too bad. You can never go down in the comments below and argue. Well, without further ado, let's start ranking the weakest and most powerful stands in JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. But before we get into that, I would like to play a little game, an idea that was totally not stolen from the New World Review, a really cool Hunter x Hunter comic creator with his channel link in the description of this video. Giorno needs help to find out what kind of ice cream flavor this random crying kid likes so you can get him a little scoop. The kid is crying so hard that he can't speak, so you must make the fatal decision of which flavor he's getting. If you choose wrong, this kid will cry even harder, piercing the eardrums of Giorno, causing him to be deaf for the rest of his life. And you will be forced to like and subscribe for more anime analysis in your feed. Choose now and I'll reveal the answer in 3, 2, 1. And it was pistachio that was this kid's favorite flavor. If you chose wrong, you must face the consequences of your actions. Apologize to Giorno in the comments below, like and subscribe. Thank you very much, and now, back to the video. Now to start off this list, we will start off with the worst of the worst being the stand that Dio himself bashed, Survivor. Survivor is a weird stand. While pretty much only being a combat stand, it has absolutely no offensive or defensive capability. Once the stand is activated, it pulsates a very light electrical current that stimulates the part of the brain that makes you go absolutely crazy with anger. The stand activates that part, causing you to be blinded with anger and just essentially try to kill everybody in that area. This stand is really only sort of powerful in extremely minute situations. Otherwise, using the stand to try to combat anybody just buffs them and allows them to accomplish inhuman feats against you. It's also not really good as a support stand either, since using it on allies would cause them to not only be buffed, but have their judgment hindered, which would cause them to attack allies as well. Overall, it's just a stand that once activated causes nothing but chaos and mayhem for nobody's benefit, except for the extremely situational position that Pucci was in, using it for his advantage in Part 6. The next worst stand on this list goes to actually two different stands, and those being Cheap Trick and Superfly. These two stands have drastically different abilities. Both do one thing very well, that being actively harming their users. Cheap Trick is a stand that attaches to your back after looking at the previous user's back. After you look at their back, Cheap Trick immediately kills that user and attaches to you, causing the case that if anybody ever looks at your back, Cheap Trick will then immediately kill you and attach to them. I threw in Superfly with Cheap Trick since Superfly traps you inside that tower with no way to escape unless you give it to somebody else. It's kind of similar in that sort of way of harming the user. It's not really as bad as having Cheap Trick though, but it's still an awful stand to have. Now before you all say that Cheap Trick is overpowered since it's an insta-kill, there's no way to really control it. If there was a way to control Cheap Trick, then yes, it absolutely would be one of the best stands being an insta-kill, but as of now, it's just a bad stand. The next stand on the worst list is going to be Highway to Hell from Part 6. Highway to Hell allows the user to inflict any damage onto the victim that they are inflicted with. This stand is absolutely terrible in anybody else's hands. To kill your enemy, you would have to either SD or be killed, which, in general, isn't a great thing. However, in the hands of the user in Part 6, this stand was absolutely incredible, just going to show that the DO's idea that all stands have their own situations that they're incredible in. But if you were the owner of this stand, it really wouldn't be all that great at all. Inflicting harm on yourself just to damage another is not great. If a good stand user were to go up against you, the floor would be wiped up real fast and there would be no real fight. Next up is another two stands, tenor sax and Canoom? Hold on,
Num.
Oh. So these two stands do break one of my rules for this list. That being, I will only rate competitive stands. I struggled finding truly bad competitive stands after the ones from before, which just goes to show even further how well written these stands are and how good they are, despite being the quote-unquote worst. But these two are not so great. Tenor sax is a stand that you might not even know. It was literally just used once in Part 3, but it was defeated and then moved on. But tenor sax was a stand in Part 3 that created illusions for Dio's Mansion. This stand is actually pretty decent actually, with the idea that it is largely a defensive stand that could be used offensively, which is why I bent the rules just a little bit for this one. We never got to see the extent that this stand could have gone, but I imagine that in the hands of a good user, having illusions could completely baffle your enemy, allowing you to get sneaky attacks in. The second one, K as I will call it, is not so much like that. K allows you to change your appearance, height, sex, and voice to anybody else, which can be incredible for intel gathering, sneak attacks, different ways of trickery. But there's a couple of problems. Those being, for one, it doesn't change your personality, and two, it doesn't change your clothes, and three, the user is Oingo from Part 3, which dramatically makes this stand not as powerful. Bastet was a stand introduced in Part 3 that made Avdol and Joseph become very good friends. In reality, the stand ability has the potential to be pretty good. Having the ability to attach very powerful magnets to people can be pretty useful in a fight. The victim would be disoriented, which a very good stand user would be able to take advantage of and control the entirety of the fight. With that being said, why is the stand so low in this worst stands list? That's because the stand needs to be touched first. Seeing an electric plug in a rock is not a great place to use this stand. It'll cause intrigue to enemy stand users, however any smart stand user would look at that, immediately know that it's too sus to be anything they mess with, and wouldn't touch it. Because of this, you really just don't have a stand if the user does or touches it. It's just an electrical plug on a rock sitting there doing nothing while JoJo's stops time and smacks you around. Good if activated, but would realistically never be activated. Alright, I know that this stand is attached to one of the most lovable boys in the series, but you really just have to think this out. Hermit Purple is not an amazing stand. Hermit Purple is an example of stand that is insanely useful and controlled by someone who absolutely knows how to wield it, but it's pretty weak stand. Its ability is to really only use the spirit photos, which is insanely useful in a lot of situations. However, in combat, it really is just weak vines that are sorta enhanced with Hammond. Now, I know that many will criticize, why is this here if I'm only looking at combat stands? I made Hermit Purple an exception due to how many times it's used in combat. There are so many times that it's used that it's pretty much mainly used as a combat stand, which is just not the main use for it. Love Deluxe is a weird one. It's a stand that has a lot of offensive and defensive potential, which is way better than most of the stands on this part of the list. With that being the case, why is Love Deluxe on this part of the list? Well, it just has a lot of very weird disadvantages. Love Deluxe is a stand controlled by Yukako, the yandere for Best Boy Koichi. The stand is pretty much just her hair and that she's able to control it, but it's omega buffed and it's pretty strong. But since the stand is tied to her hair, non-stand users are actually able to see this stand in action. This is a very weird part that I actually consider a hindrance to the stand user. Having the stand visible to non-stand users automatically makes this stand not as discreet. The moment that Yukako tries to be sneaky with her stand in a public place, there's a solid chance that somebody would notice and make a commotion that would alert the enemy stand user. This obviously isn't something too problematic. However, that's the smaller hindrance of why I put Love Deluxe on the worst ones. The other reason is that Love Deluxe has an extremely severe weakness to fire. And that's not a hidden weakness, one that takes years of research to get down. It's literally just her hair. It's common sense that it can be burned away, which any good stand user will absolutely utilize just to win the fight easily. That's also assuming that the enemy stand user doesn't manipulate fire like Avdol does. With such a grave weakness that it's so obvious, I chose to put Love Deluxe here. Empress is horrifying. I mean, look at that thing. What is that? Why is it like that? No, get that thing away from me. I don't want its little baby grub hands on me. Empress as a stand can be pretty alright. We're actually gonna have a little game here. If you can tell me, without looking it up, what the name of Empress's stand user is, you will get a digital cookie. I'll give you a second to think about it. Give up? Yeah, I did too while writing this. Apparently, the stand user's name is Nena. It just kinda goes to show a little about how this stand and its user was just quite meh. The stand ability is to first infect you after Nena here kisses you with her bud tongue. After being infected, Empress will grow on you until fully developed, where she will then just beat you to death? There are a few problems here. Very first, Empress needs to grow in your body before it can really do any damage to you, which gives good stand users plenty of time to see it growing in its vulnerable state. All you gotta do is just happen to see it, and you can take it out. Though even if you don't see it, and it grows to full strength, it's still just It's just not really all that physically strong. I mean, it was a solid matchup for Joseph since his stand isn't all that strong, but literally against any other combat stand user, it would have just died extremely quickly and moved on. This stand is just one huge meh, which lands it safely in this spot. Whew, that was a lot of stands. And we're only halfway through this video. Thank God I only have to edit another... fuck. The strongest stands list had many that were just automatic inclusions. Many that you probably already think about and know that are going to be on this list. So in the one stand that you know is going to be on the number one spot of the strongest is there, please still act surprised. Now rank. We're starting off the strongest list with the Hanged Man from Part 3. And there are already people yelling at me in the comments. Listen. Hangman is absolutely one of the more underrated stands in Part 3 and stands in general. Hangman is a stand controlled by the man with two left hands that killed Polnareff's sister. Its ability is essentially to hide inside reflections rather than in the real world. In those reflections, Hangman is actually able to attack your reflection, where you will take real world damage from. While in these reflections, Hangman is pretty much invulnerable and can't be damaged. With that being said, Hangman is just invulnerable and can attack you from safety with nothing you can do about it, right? Well, Hangman does have quite a weakness. To transport to and from the reflective surfaces, he must move in a straight line to and from. While it is an extremely quick movement, it's still a movement that you can see. During this movement, Hangman is able to take damage directly. So if you were able to catch him in air and give him a little squish, you won the fight. Hanged Man was an almost non-inclusion in this list. It almost seems unfair to the stands that are higher up that this is even part of the top 10, even though he is last. But if you really think about it, its abilities are kinda overpowered as it is. It really is just a pretty powerful stand. Going against an average stand user, Hanged Man would just be too fast between the surfaces, and can kill the victim before they even know that they're being attacked. Hanged Man, if used even better, would just have a reflection off of something that they aren't even looking at, and attack them from secret. The stand is powerful, and I stand by my statement. Huh? Yeah, okay, I'll shut up. The 9th spot on this most powerful stand list is going to Purple Haze, the stand of Fugo in Part 5. Fugo's stand is absolutely broken. It's basically an insta-kill if you were to go up against it. Purple Haze's ability is an extremely deadly virus that resides in the capsules of his fists. When those capsules break, usually from Purple Haze punching something, the virus is released. If infected with this flesh-eating virus, an adult man usually only has 30 seconds to live before succumbing to the virus. Yup, 30 seconds. There are a couple of downsides to this extremely overpowered stand though, causing it to drop down to only 9th place. Those downsides being that, for one, the virus itself has a very short range due to it dying out if contacted by the elements, such as sunlight and even indoor light is enough to kill the virus. However, once infected, the user is doomed to die. Unless you manage to make a vaccine. The virus acts like a regular virus, meaning that if you have the antibodies to fight the virus, then the virus will get beat out and you will be fine. This is shown in Part 5 after Giorno was infected, but managed to make the vaccine with the snake's antibodies for the virus. But if you don't have plot armor and are unlucky enough to stay within range of the virus to infect you before dying from the elements, then you will be doomed. Though this also counts for Fugo himself. Fugo is not immune to the virus. Though on second thought, shouldn't Giorno just make a vaccine for Fugo to make him immune from the virus? And able to just pretty much become one of the most powerful stand users? Anyway, because Fugo is not immune to the virus, it's very easy for him to get infected and die from his own ability. Obviously, just not great thing when you're fighting. Because of these few pretty drastic drawbacks, Purple Haze sits firmly in 9th place. The 8th stand on this list goes to Cream from Part 3. Cream is a stand that is controlled by Vanilla Ice. You can choose whether that's the rapper or the femboy. Now Cream is another underrated stand in my opinion. Underrated even though he did take out Avdol and Iggy pretty easily. Cream is certainly one crazy stand. Cream's main ability is having access to what is essentially an alternate dimension inside of its mouth. If you are to enter the dimension, it's pretty much an instant kill since you're just gone forever. Cream can also chew himself up and enter this kind of void state, where he is invulnerable. Not only is he invulnerable, but he's actually completely invisible as well. Very much so that going against this stand is just an absolute death sentence, since you can't do anything against it. One solution may be to kill Vanilla Ice himself before Cream can kill you, but there's just one problem. Vanilla Ice can actually just enter this void dimension without any harm to himself. So, in short, Cream is a stand that protects the user, is invulnerable, is invisible, and if it touches you, you pretty much just die. So with all that being the case, how does Cream just not be at the number 1 spot? Well, because Cream has drawbacks, because of course he does. While in this dimension, Vanilla Ice is completely blind. While this is a pretty decent setback, it still doesn't take away that while he's in it, he's completely invulnerable. Meaning that in tight situations, he can just run away and there's nothing that anyone can do about that. But it does allow the victims to also be quite tricky while fighting Cream, which is exactly what Polnareff and Iggy did to beat him. It's still an extremely powerful stand that sits very firmly and comfortably in the number 8 spot. Putting this stand in number 7 will absolutely get me a lot of hate in the comments. But as I said before, this is definitive fact, so I don't care. Number 7 goes to Killer Queen from Part 4. I know, hold on. Let me explain. Killer Queen is an absolutely insanely broken stand. Killer Queen's ability is that it's able to create bombs from whatever Killer Queen touches, which he can then detonate at any moment. With this stand, Kira literally just needs to touch his opponent with Killer Queen, blow them up, and just call it a day back to his life with his many hands. Killer Queen also comes with Sheer Heart Attack, a remote stand that is actually not controlled by Kira or Killer Queen really. Sheer Heart Attack is a stand that senses heat and automatically attacks when it sees something, blowing up whatever it attacks. Since the stand is remote and automatic, Kira can just activate it somewhere and run away while the enemies are distracted by Sheer Heart Attack. Oh, and Sheer Heart Attack is invulnerable as well. What's with all of this invulnerability? These two abilities already make Killer Queen just a broken stand, but he has another ability. After being pierced with the arrow a second time, Killer Queen gains the ability Bites the Dust. Bites the Dust implants Killer Queen into whoever Kira chooses. After being implanted, whenever Kira's identity is revealed through whoever was implanted, it causes whoever it was revealed to blow up. Afterwards, it creates a temporal loop, reverting or quote-unquote blowing up time 1 hour back into the past with nobody but the implanted person remembering what happened. Now, let me explain why Killer Queen is so low on this list. With abilities as powerful as these, and a stand user that can manipulate them near perfectly, why is Killer Queen only 7th? That's because the rest of the stands on this list are just broken. You've watched JoJo, you know what else is coming on this list. If you really think about it, it just makes sense. If I included stands for part 7 or 8, Killer Queen might not even be on this list. It's extremely powerful. So much so, it's nearly overpowered. But thinking about what else is on this list, it really just makes sense for Killer Queen to be here in 7th place. In number 6 on this list is Snails. What? Snails! Weather Report is one stand that had a lot of potential, but was only used that potential for a very short amount of time. Weather Report is a stand in part 6, which is controlled by Weather Report, the person, not the stand. Weather Report is a scary stand. Probably the stand that I would actually second least like to go against. Weather Report has the ability to control the weather through the atmosphere itself. He can make it rain, snow, thunder, rain frogs, anything he desires. This is how the stand is used for pretty much the entirety of part 6. That's until he gets his memory back from Poochie. Weather Report has a much more powerful ability, that being Heavy Weather. Heavy Weather is an ability that litters an area with rainbows. If you are to touch one of these many rainbows scattered everywhere, you slowly but surely actually start to turn into a snail, the only person immune to this ability being Weather Report himself. Once the process of turning into a snail starts, there is no way to actually stop it at all unless you defeat Weather Report. There's actually one more immunity, which is blind people. Since the way that people are turning into snails is the subliminal messages that the rainbows have that cause people are turning into snails. Or something like that. That is absolutely horrifying. You touch a rainbow and just start turning into a snail, and there's nothing you can do about it. Not only the whole snail thing, Weather Report can just suffocate you by either taking your oxygen away from around you, or poisoning you by increasing the amount of oxygen around you, causing you to die a very painful death like Poochie did. It's just a stand that is terrifying to go up against, and you have very little chance to beat overall. Next on this list in the 5th position actually goes to 2 stands, since they are practically the exact same. That being Star Platinum and The World. These 2 stands are controlled by the protagonist from Part 3 and the villain of Part 3 respectively. These stand abilities allow them to stop time, completely immobilizing everybody other than themselves, who can move in the stopped time. Star Platinum is able to stop time for 5 seconds, while Dio is able to stop time for 11 seconds, making The World just a little bit better than Star Platinum actually. Anyways, these stands are actually just extremely powerful. Only a select few stands could ever really beat this stand since their time stop ability is actually just broken. Being able to move and stop time while everyone's frozen around you, you could just donut somebody and move on. The only reason that Jotaro won the fight against Dio in part 3 is because Dio just wouldn't stop talking. Dio could have just ended Jotaro and moved on, but with plot armor and Dio's ignorance, Jotaro won. These stands and their overpowered ability stops them dead in 5th place. Next up, for the number 4 position, goes to King Crimson and Epita. King Crimson is the main villain stand in part 5. It's also just an extremely confusing stand. The ability of King Crimson also relies on the ability of the second minor stand, Epita. If you didn't know that there was a second little stand, then you wouldn't be alone, because I certainly didn't know for quite a while. But Epita is just that little creature on the top of King Crimson's forehead. Epita ability allows Diavolo to see in 10 seconds into the future. This complements King Crimson perfectly, as King Crimson takes up to 10 seconds of time and essentially erases that time for anybody else other than Diavolo himself. It's kinda like the world's time stoppage, with Dio being allowed to move around in the stopped time and nobody else. Dio is able to move and do anything inside of those 10 seconds, basically meaning he can donut you and there's nothing you can do about it. This stand does allow Diavolo to be very tricky on the things that he's able to do in the skipped time. I put it above Star Platinum in the world, pretty much solely because of this addition of Epita, allowing Diavolo to see that they're going to stop the time and skip them stopping the time, just edging them a little over them. But actually thinking about it, Dio's able to stop time for 11 seconds, so maybe add the world above King Crimson, but have King Crimson above Star Platinum? Yeah. Now we are in the top 3. These top 3 probably have 2 stands that you're absolutely expecting. And I know that you know that we all know that those 2 stands are on here. So again, when those stands are on here, please act surprised. So with number 3 on this list, we have Heaven's Door from Part 4. This is a weird inclusion, and the one that probably nobody would really expect that much. It's a stand that has the potential to really shut down any stand on this list. Heaven's Door is a stand controlled by manga artist Rohan in Part 4. Heaven's Door is an ability that allows Rohan to knock out anybody who his stand touches, and their body turns into book pages. In these book pages lies essentially all of the knowledge about you and the things that you know, revealing every secret you may have. If that was it, the stand wouldn't be great at all for combat. But there's just one little part of this ability that lands it in my 3rd strongest. That little part being that once the pages are visible, Rohan is able to write down absolutely anything he wants in those book pages, and the person has to oblige by whatever he wrote. Many times in Part 4, that was used to prevent people from attacking Rohan at all, making him literally invincible against them and would allow Rohan to just win easily. Something that was not explored is the fact that Rohan would be able to write down, this person will die in 2 seconds, causing them to wake up and just die 2 seconds later. With this, as long as Rohan hits you, even once, it's a stand that just insta-kills you and that's it. The only problem is that first condition, having Rohan hit you. He's not the fastest stand of the world, so avoiding him is not too difficult really, which is what lands Heaven's Door in number 3 on this list. And now for these last 2 stands, they are the ones that you know are here, starting off number 2 being Made in Heaven. Made in Heaven is Pucci's final stand in Part 6. Funny enough, having a stand powerful enough to restart the entire universe is kinda good. Made in Heaven's ability progressively speeds up time exponentially, while staying inside of normal time. This however does not affect the aging of human beings, but does affect the aging of everything else. Time continues to progress faster and faster until the entire universe dies and then resets. The entire time this is happening, Pucci just gets progressively faster and faster to the point that he's practically unbeatable. He'll just run around you and kill you within a moment's notice without you even knowing it. All the while, Pucci can just keep resetting the universe whenever he pleases, which he will stay in as long as you're alive, but eventually he will just kill you. The only real counter that the stand has is between 2 stands. One being Weather Report, which is the stand that actually ended up beating Pucci, and the number 1 on this list that you are already thinking about and know why it gets beaten. Speaking of which, let's get to the number 1 stand on this list. The most powerful stand of JoJo parts 1 through 6, and I'd even say all of JoJo's, is Golden Experience Requiem. Surprised? I sure hope so. Golden Experience Requiem is just by far the most powerful stand of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. Having a Requiem stand already boosts you up drastically on this list, and the only reason Silver Chariot Requiem wasn't on here is due to not being a combat stand. Even though it had that soul swap ability, its combat potential was just sort of, eh. Regardless, Golden Experience by itself is an extremely powerful stand. Its abilities being a lot of different things really, but his main abilities being that for one, he can make life out of non-living objects such as butterflies from money or a frog from a suitcase. Any damage inflicted upon these living creatures that JoJo creates is damaged upon you as well. He can also heal and kinda sorta reanimate the dead, which he did with Bucciarati. I guess that it's less real reanimation, more just giving a corpse life again so it can just think it's alive, but it's still dead and decaying. But anyways, Golden Experience is a great stand. By no means is it absolutely overpowered, but it's a very good, very powerful stand. But this is about Golden Experience Requiem. Now, Golden Experience Requiem is by far the most powerful stand that JoJo has created so far. While it's a little bit close with when it comes to Soft and Wet and those future Part 8 shenanigans, I still do think that Golden Experience Requiem is more powerful. After becoming a Requiem stand, not only did all of Golden Experience's previous abilities get buffed like crazy, but it got the most powerful ability it has, that being Reduced to Zero. The idea of Reduced to Zero is honestly just quite easy to understand. The ability allows Golden Experience Requiem to reduce any action taken to 0, basically meaning that whenever anyone would attack Giorno, he could just reduce it back to 0, making the attack never happened. This does just quite literally make Giorno completely invulnerable. There is quite literally nothing you can do against Golden Experience Requiem, since anything you do, no matter what, just gets reduced back to 0 and never happens. This can be used in so many creative ways, one way actually being in Part 5, that being Giorno sending Diavolo into an infinite loop of death, making it so that whenever Diavolo dies, he reduces that action to 0, causing him to reset and go into the next death scenario. For as far as we know, this goes on forever. That is probably the most terrifying thing I can think of. Since the stand is basically invulnerable and can just do that to people with no real effort, it by far allows Golden Experience Requiem to sit very firmly in the #1 spot, becoming the most powerful stand of JoJo's. And there it is, the whole list of the 10 of the worst and the 10 best stands of JoJo's, parts 1 through 6. It was a long list with a lot of writing, but it was very enjoyable to write. And just one last reminder, this list is absolute, final, there is no room for opinion that is allowed. Having an argument in the comments of a stand that should be on this list is not allowed. Please do not go down into the comments or like or subscribe. I will not hear you out. Also, very quickly, here is a fake list for the people who just skip to the end. If this is you, go back and watch through it. Please. Thank you again so much for watching. This video is my longest one I have ever done, which is also just another JoJo video. I think I'm seeing a theme here. I will never complain about making a JoJo video since I love talking about it and giving my completely factual opinions over either the parts or the stands. It's just super fun to do and I'm glad that y'all enjoy watching them. Just one more time, if you liked the video, hit that subscribe button. It shows me that this is the type of content that you enjoy and I can work on even more for you in the future. One last time, thank you, and I'll see you in the next video.